right, let's get the show on the road. My name is Dan Degryse, and this is a live at FDIC 2024. We are our Mental Health Monthly. My co-host,
Chris Muscle.
Chris Muscle from
McKinney, Texas.
And we got some people representing McKinney out here.
You
can't see them, but they're here representing. And our guest today is
Casey Ellsworth.
From Dallas, Texas. And what I like to say is this studio is brought to you by Firehouse Subs and the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. Enjoy more subs, save more lives. Find out more about restaurant ownership at www.firehousefranchising.com. And we're off and racing. What we're going to be doing really today is talking about what the title is, Mental Health Monthly, and how do we help people, right? I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah.
All three of us really have been in the behavioral health world. I've for about 3 or 4 decades. Casey for about 6, 7, 8 years. And
dating back to my military, 10, 15-ish.
Yeah, 15 years. So we got a fair amount of experience here. And what we really want to do is talk to Casey to really find out how somebody gets into the behavioral health arena. How do you start up your own department's peer support, right? What are some of the barriers? Who do you need to support you? How do you traverse that with being a firefighter? Because you don't look like you're a painter. You look like you're ready to knock down walls, right? I mean, how do you go from being a Dallas firefighter, right? And then working behind the scenes and really, but you're saving lives. But let me start off with what got you to want to get into the behavioral health arena?
So I think as you've pointed out before, I don't know so much it's what I do, it's who I am. And it's something that I've probably always done my entire life. I just wasn't necessarily doing it in an official capacity. And I feel like a lot of us do it as firefighters, just lending that ear or just being there for somebody, whenever they're going through a difficult time. I'd say the challenge is getting the information out of other people.
So I learned a little bit about Casey yesterday, and I don't know if he's going to say it to everybody here, but I kind of found out a little bit more over the last, and we've known each other for about 8 years, is that you talked a little bit about how you grew up and really fending for yourself. And I look at it as, I can look at you as, oh my gosh, you went through that. Or I could look at you as, hey, you went through that and you came out to the man you are today. And what you do, not only from the fire service and the behavioral health world, but the family man. You said you kind of been doing behavioral health or peer support for a long time. What does that mean when you were a younger Casey Ellsworth?
Well, like you mentioned, I knew my childhood was different, but I didn't know necessarily how it was different and what I was essentially missing out on. But I would hear other people struggling, or I'd hear other people maybe crying because they didn't get that computer that they wanted for Christmas, or I'd hear those kids at school that maybe their mom or dad, didn't get them something or told them no in their life. And well, to me, even what they had was completely different than I was. And I would just try to go walk alongside them and encourage them that just because they're not getting that computer, it doesn't necessarily mean that, their life's over. Living in a hotel where I grew up, drugs were a pretty common thing. And so I felt pretty fortunate that I didn't get caught up in that behavior. I mean, needles, powders, and alcohol was, it was prevalent, it was readily available and there. But for some reason, I didn't.
So I know you went from one department to another. The first department you were at? Wasatch, and then now Dallas for 8 years?
14
years. So I don't think you probably thought that you were getting in a Dallas Fire Department or the McKinney Fire Department to just do peer support, right?
Right.
I don't think any of us really, right? I mean, I spent 30 years in Chicago Fire, and kind of like you, I won't get into my childhood, but wanted to help the next person. And that's kind of what peer support is all about. It's our culture helping one another. how did you get into it?
Well, it started off kind of rough. My approach was not always the best. I was the agitator around the fire station.
No.
I would kind of poke at people, especially if I knew something was bothering them or if they were going through something.
Poking or punching?
I mean,
okay.
Poking.
Okay.
But I think what I was doing was I was trying to get them in a vulnerable spot to where they kind of knew or understood, hey, I might be able to relate to you, but getting them to realize that or see that was kind of more the challenge. And again, my approach wasn't always the best.
Was there a particular, was everybody fair game, or were there a particular?
I mean, I treated everybody pretty fair. Officers, non-officers, it didn't matter. So.
Yeah.
That's tough, right? You see a need, you want to help somebody, so you're poking them. You're prodding. We're fixers, right? Whether it's on a fire truck, an ambulance, and then maybe they walk that same lifestyle, or you've been in that, and then that guy doesn't want to talk about it. Vapor locks. He just does it, and so it becomes a challenge. Like you said, right? You just keep, because you know what the end result is you need to help them, and that's pretty challenging.
Yeah.
That's all you got?
No, I mean,
that's where it started, right? It was in the firehouse.
Well, the thing is that he's probably, I mean, for example, how many people have you probably talked
to? Hundreds.
Yeah.
Humbling.
And your response is, yeah. That's the humbling response of somebody that.
But it started in the firehouse, right?
Yeah. So
and then that projected you into bigger roles within the Dallas Fire Department peer support.
Sure. So I went through a critical event, back in 2017, when my partner and I were ambushed with a guy with an AR. Right.
So yeah, right. Critical event, right? Yeah. Basically being shot at.
Yeah. On a call, pulling up on a call.
Yeah.
Getting out of the ambulance and your partner being shot right away.
And so, while it sounds horrible and it was pretty tragic, I wasn't necessarily affected as bad as what I could have. And, that was kind of the event that essentially gave me that street credit, if you will. I didn't work at the fireman's fire station. In Dallas, we have particular stations that, I mean, you're just.
So let's back up a second. So and I appreciate that. So I'm not as affected, and because there's trauma and secondary trauma and vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue all in our field.
Yep.
We've been talking about that. I've been talking about it. You guys have been talking about it. There's people here that talk about it. Bobby Holton and David Rhodes helps us talk about it, and this is why we have the show. So you say you've been affected by it. What does that mean? Not to say it from a bad sense, because you're here and now you're helping other people, but what was that effect?
So I think that there's a couple different ways to look at it. The first answer is there's a difference in thinking something and believing it, right? So I was able to come to terms with, okay, my buddy's still alive and the shooter's dead. I can't tell you how I believed that. I mean, because I thought it, but inside I believed it, but it didn't mean that I didn't try to turn to alcohol or I didn't turn to anger, the hypervigilance. And, I talk a lot about not driving next to a car going down the freeway. Our door handles couldn't be side by side because everybody in Texas has guns in my mind, and I thought they were going to pull a gun out and shoot me. But, everything would rev up. I'd start kind of having a little bit of anxiety if I slowed down, and I drove a Prius. So there is no power to just push the gas to go.
Did you know that? Oh yeah, go ahead and say it. Right?
Yeah, the big guy goes on the smallest cars, right?
or
gas mileage.
Or maybe the Prius was Casey.
Yeah. The other side of it is, the department didn't necessarily respond the way that I would have, probably what I was expecting, and I could have been angry and disgruntled and frustrated the rest of my career. Or I could have taken that stance and thought, you know what, I'm going to try to do my best to make sure that nobody has to go through what I went through post-incident.
Yeah, so it's not much unlike fire service in a sense. I mean, we got some of the smartest and brightest people. We work with a lot of organizations. FDIC is a place where we get that information. But it usually takes a critical event for us to say, hey, enough is enough. how do you move forward? So then who did you have to, and I'm going to ask you too this, who do you need to get the ear of to move that forward to where Dallas's peer support is where it's today?
Each department is probably going to be a little bit different, as you know, size and politics and things. But I'd say either the executive board within your association or your union, or somebody in the command staff that's willing to offer that chair and to see if you can gain some momentum there.
How easy was it to get that meeting?
Through the association, it was fairly easy.
Okay.
They're the ones that offered me to go to peer support training.
Okay.
But I feel like they were sending me to go get help. They didn't realize that they were sending me to, come back and start a peer support program.
Very good. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, our peer support program was in place before I got there, but I'll give you a little different answer.
The department had a great instructor years ago.
They did, yeah. You might be sitting next to me, I don't know. But, we had our own critical incident, not necessarily to get into details, but I think something that's valuable is I was part of that call. And I remember being at the funeral. I remember leaving, and we'd gone through the peer support and the diffusing and the debriefing and all the things that are associated with CISM. I remember leaving the funeral and looking at our fire chief, and I said, hey, I don't know if it's important for you to know, but that process was really helpful. I know I've shared with you guys before, I didn't want to go through the process. Being a peer support guy, a mental health guy, finding myself on the other side of it, I didn't want to be part of it. I did because I knew I needed to. And I told our chief that because I often wonder sometimes when they're sitting up there and they're looking at budgets and overtime and training costs and do we really need this program? Right? And so it stuck out enough for me to share that with him because, peer support programs can be challenging. They can be, it is very department, very organization dependent, and even depending on where you are in the country.
Yeah, so something that I always have said, and we say from the IFF, from our peer support model, really is you need a chief and a champion, right? You need the fire chief, you need the union president, as you mentioned, and then you need a champion. And I always say when you look around and you don't find that person, you're that person, right? It's like, okay, so now what? So now you're in Dallas, you've had that critical incident, you said that you've gone through your own response, right? Because nobody's going to come out of that. A car accident, you have an injury, physical, mental, emotional. You have to have a recovery time. We all have to have that recovery time. And I know you spent 4 years in the military, right? So immersed in battle, how is somebody supposed to transition back into the barracks or back into home? Like, okay, go change it in your civilian clothes, right?
Right.
It just doesn't happen for you. Now, you said that they're looking to maybe help you. They're maybe looking at you as the person to drive this peer support. We've had many conversations. You didn't know where you're really fitting it. You didn't be like, you weren't carrying a banner saying, hey, I want to be the lead peer supporter. You had even said to me at some point, what, in regards to that stuff?
I'm done.
Yeah. So
I'm not doing this anymore.
And the important thing is to know is that the fire service, there are hundreds and thousands of great individuals, but we also, if we don't have mentors and leaders like yourselves to say, hey, you know what, it's okay. I'm not a big fan of not to be okay, but if you're recovering from an incident or incidences, hey, leave me to F alone, right? Allow me to find my equilibrium. But then it's also good to know, and I'll just say this, is that when I ran the Chicago Fire's EAP for 14 years, in 2008, 2009, you all know we had 11 suicides in 2.5 years. I would drive home from work angry. It's not a good way to leave work and then go home with your family. I'm like, how are we going to stop these wonderful men and women from dying by suicide? And it sucks not having that answer, right? When people call you, do you have to have the answer every single time?
No,
Absolutely not.
You believe that? Did you believe that then?
no. Like back then,
Yeah.
like when maybe
First
newer,
started?
yeah, no, and I remember us having a conversation early on of because it goes back to the whole health thing, and it's like somebody you want to have the answer, you want to have the solution right away, and you're not going to. And sometimes, like to your point, we've talked about is I often like to say it's okay to live in the moment, lean into it, right? Reach up, reach out, whatever. But what are we going to do moving forward? Because there is a healthy balance. But
Well, in the
Yeah.
fire service, we have a guy or girl for everything, right? But for our mental and emotional, do we have that person? At that time, for me, when our members were dying by suicide, I didn't have that person to talk to. How about you as you were going? Oh, you're smiling. Can everybody see that on Facebook? On Facebook, all right, he's either wants to hit me or go ahead. What's your answer?
No, I thought you were going to allude back to this conversation we were having. Getting frustrated with you, but
I've had it done before. All I got to do is call my wife.
so you want to be able to have the answer, but I think too, with the pressure that I was feeling was our window of opportunity is very, very, very small, right? And I didn't want the perception to be that peer support was taking over CISM because Dallas, we've had CISM, we had chaplains, we had EAP.
How do we all play well in the sandbox, right?
Yeah, I made a resiliency coordinator 2016, 2017. And so it wasn't, okay, here's this program or here's this guy. You know, I tell myself, I don't want to be the guy that, okay, I got shot at a few times, my buddy who had shot, and then now all of a sudden I'm coming out and I want to save the world.
You see how he just, that's most peer support. I got shot at. You know, I almost,
Yeah.
my buddy almost died, and
Right.
I don't want to be that, guy. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but during the peer
It's what most people in the fire
Right.
service will be. They'll downplay the enormity of it. Go ahead.
But then also I use it though to be able to connect with people. Like I'll be a lot more vulnerable and get a little more intimate, right, with feelings and things, because we're not always going to be able to relate. Just I can only imagine, what he's seen or how many if he's been shot at overseas. So, but our reactions might be different from training and experience what you're equipped with.
He got to shoot back.
So, but our feelings of the isolation, the loneliness, or the struggles, the anger, the anxiety, or whatever may be going on in our head. That's how we can relate a lot of times. And
Who were you able to share that with, if anybody?
my wife.
Okay. All right. And you did do that. Okay. And I know Crystal, she's a lovely woman. You're so lucky.
I am.
But yeah, sometimes we don't do that.
Right. And I talking about that, and whether it's peer support, not peer support, mental health in general, bad call, whatever that looks like. If there's one thing that I think I could say for myself, and a lot of us are figuring out, is trying to do it alone is not the answer. Whether it's
But how many people try to do that?
right, whether it's a wife, it's a buddy at the firehouse, it's a friend that's not a fireman, what chaplain, counselor, whatever that looks like, we know that trying to work through that alone isn't going to work long term. It might work in the short term. I'm good. Come back to the job in a couple shifts. And how long are you good for though, before something else happens?
That's a great. So how long did you talk to your wife right away, or did it take a minute?
So the firefighters told me when I went to the hospital, because that's where Will was having surgery. We weren't sure if he was going to make it or not until that evening. And they said I lost my voice because I told that story just so many times. And I think that kind of helped process it. The next day, I got on a plane and actually went out of town. And well, to answer your question, it took about 3 or 4 days before I would share with her actually like what happened. But she knew, put her hand on my leg, or she knew to hug me, or she knew if I like brush her off, she knew just to kind of, and it wasn't directed at her, but she was unfortunately at the receiving end of some of that.
But you didn't punch her.
I did not punch her. No.
Well, you guys heard the other day from me, right? I was in a conversation with my wife and somebody else that shared an incident that happened to me 28 years ago, and she responded to me. I've never heard that before, and I'm like, oh, how do I got to buy her now to get out of this one? And you talk about relationships, work-wise, coworkers, leaders, family, and we wanted to protect them. But also, I'll be honest, I didn't always know how to deliver them.
Right.
And what I learned from coming up on 30 years of marriage and then about almost 4 decades in this behavioral health world is offer the person the opportunity to have that discussion, right? Don't force it on them, but just offer them that opportunity and go here. Kind of like we're here. Some people are going to listen, some people are not. And how have you seen it for your department?
I think one thing that we don't think about sometimes is, we have our official peer support team, right? How much peer support just organically happens at the kitchen table? We talk about the kitchen. That's where the lawyers are, the plumbers, the engineers, the marriage counselors, the tax consultants. Yeah. All the world's problems are solved at the firehouse table. How much peer support happens at that table that is unofficial, right? And so I think it starts in the firehouse. We talk, we've heard a lot about culture this week, right? So there's the low hanging fruit, the high hang, or whatever you want to look at it. But I think having that.
There's been an informal peer support for a long time, and
right.
We're just making it a more formal process.
I think on the peer support level, the bigger challenge is going back to the culture, changing the culture, right? I know you don't like it's okay to not be okay, but it's, however you coin that phrase of breaking the stigma, the mantra, the type A tough guy, the trucky, we can't say anything because we're saying Casey's he's not emotional, so I can't be. Right? I think
he's trying his best right now not to show anything.
I'm gonna wonder why he keeps doing this and looking at me.
Well, because
I'm like, got to pan the camera over there.
Look at that. You have a mirror at home, and you see how wide you are.
But look at him. I think he might be more red than me right now. But I think that's something that is often maybe not forgotten about, but we don't think of it that way. It's like there's a lot that happens inside the walls of that firehouse that is so therapeutic.
Yeah.
Right.
And from a culture, so I used to use the word culture. I'm doing a class today, right?
Yep. We're going to talk about that.
Is I speak a little bit about culture, but culture is a belief. It's not tangible.
Right.
When I brought up the word culture to Bobby Hall, he tore me a new, you know what?
Yep.
And he's like, culture is made from leaders and leadership in the tribe and the organization. It's a tangible thing. It's the actions of the individual and the beliefs, but culture is derived out of leadership. So let's more talk about leadership style and mentorship and vulnerability. And as today they mentioned being uncomfortable. We're comfortable when we pull away until we're not. Right? We're distant from the people that matter to us. Like you kind of shared with your spouse. Same with me is that I kind of want to be with my wife. I don't harm her with the thoughts in the events that I've had, but I got to stay connected. The same thing we do with the firehouse now when we're creating firehouses, right? That everybody's isolated.
Yeah,
that's the wrong
correct
way. So peer support. People that want to create it are creating peer support right now within the organization. You need leadership. You need both the union and the fire department. You need a champion. You need money. You need people to do it. What are some of the other? Let's talk about what are some of the barriers that you both experienced.
For me, I'd say the number one barrier used to be, I would say, the culture, but I would always refer to it as curving the culture. Right? Hearing what you just said, I guess what I'm saying in the term that they understand,
It's
but
beliefs.
really it's
the belief is that
curving the mindset or
right.
their beliefs. But think
changing
that
the narrative.
fortunately or fortunately, the ones that have taken their lives recently in our department have helped kind of springboard us forward in helping curb that culture and open the officers' mindsets. And even some of the older guys are more on board, and they're some of the biggest champions for it. They're not necessarily willing to be a part of peer support, but they're willing to go ask somebody else, or they're willing to just feed them to the peer support team. So I would say probably, I mean, stigma is another one, because there's just that mistrust or the divide between the command staff and boots on the ground. And so anytime that there's that mistrust, there's going to be all the questions that go in your head about the what ifs. And the department has taken a pretty good stance on, offering time off to go to treatment that doesn't come out of your sick bank. We do have mental health time where you can get up to 60 hours, so 2.5 shifts essentially. To
Did
try
you
to,
always have that, or did that get instituted? And how long did that take?
I think it got instituted like in 2020 or 2021.
Okay.
And it was pretty immediate. I don't know if something happened in Austin or if the police department, the fire department got together and approached city management. I know city management was also very open to what can we do moving forward because we were dying, and so.
Yeah.
And then I would say the other biggest barrier right now is just logistics. With branding and marketing, like how do you get
How do you get the word out?
the word out? The 59 stations, 3 shifts. We have 4 shifts on dispatch. Plus, we have an inspections unit. We have an arson unit. We have a training division. We've got our maintenance division, which oftentimes they were never really considered part of that. I don't want to say part of the family, obviously, because they work for the fire department, but as seeing traumatic things. But we send people over there for light duty and to do certain projects for them. The guy was there for a long time, and inevitably, a couple years ago, took his life. Which they saw him every day and talked to him, saw him leave for lunch, come back from lunch, and things like that. And so we've kind of, included them and involved them in it
Good.
as
Yeah,
well.
don't leave anybody behind, right? Consider everybody that is on the department, and that even gets into spousal and so forth. How about you, Chris? I know you've been on McKinney for just a couple of years. You were on another department for many years. What were the barriers in general? And I'm not trying to pick on any department because
No.
we all had the same barriers.
Right. They're all the same, different name on the side of the shirt, right? I think really the biggest it's 2 parts. And I feel like for me, one part we can kind of control and one part is kind of uncontrollable from our end. And it's the stigma, whatever you call it. It's the, and it takes the older guys,
Looking at you, Jason.
do you see how I did older and not old guy?
I think you're having a tick. You got a tick going on.
Yeah, stepping up, right? And it's not the older guys breaking down after a call or say it, but it's just creating that environment of, I mean, this guy's 18 years old, 19 years old, and he just saw that. I like to say everybody has their world stage call their first year, whatever that looks like, right? That is going to be a challenge for them, okay? And yeah, so the rest of the guys in the crew, they've seen that maybe 100 times. They've been doing it 30, 40 years. That's that 19-year-old kid's first time seeing that car wreck or that pediatric call.
Yeah.
Right? And creating that environment where it's okay for him to live in it, right? And then the other challenge that I feel like is a little more uncontrollable, education and all those other things, is the people being willing to reach out. I think when you change the belief of it, the culture, the stigma, whatever you want to call that, then it makes that, maybe I'm going to call that phone number and reach out. And then we haven't even gotten to this point, and we probably won't today, but it's as big of a part of it as building the right team and having the right people, because that will make or break a program, having the right people on the team.
Oh, you guys are definitely right in the sense is that, don't get me wrong, is that there's a word in the dictionary called culture, but in there's beliefs. Where do the beliefs come from, right?
Right.
And so if we just put that on a point, well, okay, culture, well, how do we get to that point?
Yeah.
Right. So those are usually verbal and physical action by someone or some group or some tribe or people. So then now you make it tangible, right? So that I can look and go, okay, the stigma is there, but is stigma just going to disappear? No way.
No.
What do we have to do to change that stigma? We've talked about this. What do you have to do? And you've already said what you've done, but it came from a belief in the beginning that you wanted to help the next person. When we talk about trying to put teams together, like what's the best team? It's not always the prettiest, the fastest, the strongest, right? The one that can run. It's who has the heart and the desire to help the next person.
Right.
How do you judge that? How do you get an x-ray thing and look at somebody's heart and go, okay, you belong on, I could have taken 100 classes, but if I'm not empathetic, if I don't care, if I don't have that innate desire to help the next person over me, which I know both of you have done, and I know I have done, which actually created some barriers with my relationship with my wife because we have a tendency to take those phone calls. Then you get into the whole longevity of a peer team. Once you establish it, how do you sustain it? How do you work burnout? Because people are not only firefighters and paramedics, but now peer support. And we know from PhDs and doctors that there's a thing called secondary trauma and vicarious trauma. And then when you are empathetic now with others, you're going to be emotionally drained.
Right. And I think that to that one point right there is, and I remember having this conversation with you years ago. When you're talking to somebody, whether it's they're in crisis, a bad call or something, you naturally want to absorb that.
The Green Mile.
Right. Yeah. And so that's all other element of you're taking care of them, who's taking care of you. Right. But I think building the right team, and you have to obviously the empathy. Are they in it for the right reason? Right? Does the organization trust them, or at least feel like they can trust them? Listen, if they don't trust that guy, unfortunately, he's got no place on the team because, no, I'm not saying you can't build into that, but we all know.
Well, then how do you measure trust, right? It's not a degree.
Right.
It's not a certification. How do you measure trust for your team? How do you do that when you are talking with individuals to come on your team?
A lot of them, I think it's a lot of our team members, it's happened through just organically, I guess you could say.
Right.
It's ones that kind of helped earlier on or just steer them in the right direction. I mean, obviously, they're the ones that do the work. But a lot of that came from early on was people that are getting in trouble or either at work or at home. And then that was like backwoods, underground, nothing fire department related. We're meeting at a park, we're meeting at a coffee shop, having conversations, and essentially help them. And then I don't know the time period, but there becomes a point in time where something happens to them where they want to give back or they want to now help the next person. And so that's how a lot of them came along. The other way that we did it is we merged two peer teams in a CISM team. And when you're asking, how do you grade them or how do you pick them? And there's not a template out there. And so especially then what training are we going to have? And there was all these questions. So what we did was cleared everybody's slate, myself and the resiliency coordinator. We passed out an application to everybody. And then we asked them on the application, who would you talk to if you were in a crisis or you were in a difficult position? And we reached out to a handful of those people and then invited them, and, sent them an application and tried to
the nomination
build it that way. And I think with anything else, attrition happens. The peer supporters, they kind of come and go, and you want to, as a coordinator, I want to look myself in the mirror like, was there something more I could be doing to keep them engaged or keep them involved, or is it just time? And then when I look at clinicians, even in the mental health world, there's a pretty high turnover there, or they're switching from private practice to a group, or they go from a group to a treatment center, and I think that world's constantly changing as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. One thing about developing a team, right? But then how about sustaining it? That's a whole nother aspect.
It is. Yep. And, you guys know this, but one thing that I do is, and I've been doing it for almost a little year straight now, is for me personally, I go to counseling and I talk about it, but I go every week, once a week, and whatever works for you or your schedule, I go once a week, whether it's good week, bad week, beautiful week, rainy week, it doesn't matter. What I know is things in the past that I've tried. Right, I was the guy, especially being a military guy. Oh, I'm having a tough time. I'm gonna go to counseling. Oh, things are bad. Counseling,
Yeah.
right? And then roller coaster. Oh, things are bad again. And so that really worked well for me. And then after our incident in our department involving one of our captains, I started going to counseling again the week after that. I said, you know what? I'm going to go once a week regardless, especially being involved in peer support because you have the vicarious trauma, the secondary trauma. And gosh, what a game changer that is. But I think it's just as important to remind the peer support members, the guys on the team, the gals on the team, that you got to be taking care of yourself too. Because when you don't, it naturally goes home to the wife, it goes home to the kids, it goes to your coworkers, right? And you start picking up on that irritability, mood swings, performance levels. So we have to take care of ourselves as much as we're taking care of everyone. It's no different than what we do.
Well, that phenomenon is that, like, if you, I don't know about you guys, not throwing you under the bus, but for people, they get sick, right? They get an antibiotic. The doc says take it for 10 days. You take it for 7, you feel better. What do you do with the other 3 days, right? You throw them out.
Yeah. And then what happens? You get sick again.
Right, yeah, and you're
Yeah.
wondering why you got the same bug or something like that. Or you go to the doc and I got a bum shoulder and I get a cortisone shot. Does that mean I could go back to what I was doing? Or do I got to let the cortisone shot heal, rest, digest, and heal before I go back to do those other things? Anyhow.
I think I wanted to go back on one thing that you'd mentioned was, we talked about the team trust. I think something else that is important for the team too is getting into the firehouses before the incident occurs.
Oh,
not only when the incident occurs.
right.
So obviously,
It become the fabric of
Yeah, it does.
people have to see you. Something IFF and
Yeah.
every program, anybody that's been trained realizes that I don't want to see you when the crap hits the fan.
Right.
I want to know you beforehand, and that's
Yeah.
where chaplains come in. Or if they just show up when somebody dies, that and the chaplain gets paired together. But if that chaplain comes out to the firehouse, I don't know if you both have chaplains within your departments and peer support. We did, but we really didn't have them integrated with our peer support. When I do treatment, I involve chaplains in that process, and that becomes more than just spiritual or religious. It's trust and togetherness. What would you say to somebody that wants to get either on a team or become the coordinator?
If you're feeling led to do the job, seek it out. Whether if it's with your own department, if it's some cities are creating groups, like I'm making this up, but like Northeast Tarrant County, right? They might be accumulating a lot of
Like a
groups,
regional teams, yeah.
like they have with USAR and Trench Rescue and Swiftwater. You kind of got to borrow from here or there. And as you know, if you're gonna be picked or put in for the peer coordinator position, just have your network and the people that you can lean on, the people that you trust, the people that, and I would offer probably more than one. Right, my wife can't get the brunt of everything. And there's some things. It's not that I want to filter it for her, but I think men and women process emotions different, especially with her being intimate with me. She probably wants me to feel better. She wants to be able to help me get through it. But sometimes I'm just frustrated or I don't really understand something. If she doesn't understand the culture, or she doesn't understand the chain of command structure, she may not be the best one to talk to in that moment. So I would just encourage them to, look inward and give an honest the evaluation of yourself. Am I truly in a good place, or am I maybe doing this? I think sometimes we can get involved with this to help other people, to maybe mask or kind of hide from what we might be dealing with. And so we've got to make sure that if that is us, it's okay, but just challenge people to take care of that first before you take that next step and be a coordinator. As a coordinator, you're going to be shuffling a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts. You kind of get stuck in between, you're in a filter between the field and the command staff. I know I'm learning really quick that I struggle with people pleasing, I guess, and wanting to make the firefighters, become their focus. And somebody mentioned the other day in a class I was taking that, chiefs are more looking at preventing the issue, and the firefighters looking at fixing the issue. And you've kind of got to look through both lenses whenever you're, taking a potential problem and take it to the command staff, or the command staff's giving you a different answer, and you've got to deliver that to the firefighters.
Well, I truly appreciate, again, I'm the old guy in the group here, been doing this for a long time. You guys have been doing it for a while, but less than 10 years. There's people that want to get in it, don't know where to go. I think they can reach out to you, Google you, find Casey Ellsworth in Dallas, and find Chris Muscle in McKinney. Is it worth it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say most days it would. I owe you a lot. I'll be forever in debt. You've been a mentor. You've been there for me a lot. And so, you helped get this thing started and kind of helped me grow as a person, kind of helped me, I mentioned wanting to quit early on. And you, not have told me, okay, do it or don't do it, but just kind of challenged my thoughts.
All right, go tell everybody how many times you got mad at me over the last 2 years.
It was a lot. You never knew it, but yeah, it was a lot. I called you for answers and you wouldn't give them to me, and that was frustrating in the moment. But I think that it has helped me grow. It's helped me be able to try to lead and teach other people, because I see a lot of the same. They'll get frustrated, or they'll try to ask in a different way,
Frustration
thinking
is
I'm
not a bad thing, right?
Right.
People are going to go one of two ways, right? Words forward or coward.
Yeah.
But if you have the support from home and you've got the support from the firefighters, it is definitely worth it.
How about you? Been worth it?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I wouldn't look back
Easy?
on it. No, not always. No, it's not. It's not always easy. I wouldn't change it for the world. It's not why we do it, but it's pretty cool to see somebody come out the other end.
Yeah, I say we always hear about the bad things, right? We hear about the deaths, the suicides, line of duty deaths. Scott was talking about that yesterday. David Rhodes was talking about, how about the wins, right?
Yeah.
Those people that when you get that phone call, right, 6 months later, a year later, I'll just say this. I had a buddy of mine who was suicidal. 3 of us went into a bar, spent 2.5 hours. He was about twice your size, so we were not going to drag him out of there. And we got him in the hospital, and I didn't know what happened after that. But he sent me an email a year later. He goes, "Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I attempted suicide 2 weeks after that event. I'm not proud of it, but I did not die by suicide." He goes, "But please know, if you, and I know this has happened to you guys, if you and the other guys didn't show up at that bar, I would have gone home and killed myself." And it was, that's powerful, right? For everybody that's out there, if you want to help one of your own, get involved with an established peer team, talk to your chief officer, talk to your training officer, talk to your union rep, and start it. And call you two guys, because I don't take calls anymore. I just want to say thanks to everybody out there, David Rhodes, for allowing us to have this platform. See you next time. We're out.
Thank you.